Hello, welcome to this video. Thank you so much for tuning in, sharing in this now moment with myself and with one another. If you haven't seen these videos before, welcome back. If you have, my intention is unity and oneness. I wanted to just go into a little bit of a breakdown to simplify some of the things we might be feeling and why we might be feeling these things. From my perspective, of course. And so if you've seen these videos before, this may be something you've already watched me do with my wonderful stick figures and my art. However, I'm just offering a different perspective, maybe in addition to the older videos that I've done, based on the fact that we're constantly growing, we're constantly exchanging information. And as we do that, we're constantly shifting the angle or the perspectives in which we are interpreting our environment and what's happening within our bodies and our lives in general. So if you haven't seen these videos before, I am a clairvoyant and clairaudient. So I receive my information by going into my heart space, dropping into meditation, and just tuning into the field, essentially, the unified field that we are all part of. And I allow my own energies to basically connect with these frequencies. And I then read those frequencies, and I utilize sight, sound, synchronicities, toning, light language, all of it. And so that's how I receive my information. So I invite you to listen with an open heart and take what resonates, and the rest you can just let go of. And this is all about our own personal journey. So we are each going to be going through unique experiences, and we may have a unique understanding or perspective that others may not hold. And that is part of this experience from my perspective. Now, having said that, we are in this ascension, and I'm not going to talk completely about ascension. I want to talk about the month of August that we're in currently. However, this is relevant beyond time. It's relevant beyond just where we are right now in linear time. This ascension process is ongoing, and I like to call it expansion process. And I also like to call the things we're experiencing upgrades. I have this recognition that as we move up through the octaves, if you will, as we move up through the dimensions, as we move up in our frequency or energy, or as we expand out and become, I'm hearing more buoyant, right, lighter, we start to let go of the heavier, dense energies that have been accumulating within our physical bodies, emotional bodies, mental body, earthly body, so on and so forth. Sorry, I just was seeing the nesting dolls. From my perspective, we aren't just a physical being. We are in physical form, but these physicalities are created through emotions and thoughts and belief systems. And I feel like I need to write that down too. So let me do that real quick. Well, this video isn't exactly about those other layers. Everything is connected. We are quantum, we're working at a quantum level. And essentially, as we go through this process of dropping some of the sludge, hence my brown stick figure that's surrounded by sludge, we start to release certain things. I'm hearing gas. So I'm going to pause just for a moment. Okay. Had a little bit of an interruption there. So we have this sludge essentially that is a buildup of residual stuff. It can be from childhood. It can be from poor eating habits, let's say, or let's say we have a lot of stored anxiety in our body, a lot of cortisol, which we'll talk about in a minute. So essentially, we're going through this upgrade. And as this energy lightens up, as we become more buoyant, as we release, and I'm seeing balloons kind of floating, all of that stuff is essentially released. And sometimes I use the word realized. We begin to remember, because that's part of what this whole expansion, ascension, upgrade process is all about. We've forgotten, right, who we really are, what we're capable of. We've gone through life thinking things were one way, and now we're realizing things are not that way, or I am capable of this, or for those who've had a lot of fear or anxiety, or they might start to go, wait a minute, I actually am okay. I can start that career that I want to start. I can do this. So as we go through these realizations, we begin to drop and let go of those weights that have been kind of holding us at the bottom of the ocean, so to speak, and we become lighter. Yet, part of this process is about us remembering, realizing, recognizing all the R's, right? And what we're experiencing because of all of those weights or the sludge that was attached to us, all of those attachments, beliefs, systems, I think that's an important little thing too, attachments, right? Things that have weighted us down, things we have given meaning to that were, I'm seeing, like, I think I've talked about this before, but if you've ever seen The Labyrinth, that puppet that's got all of the stuff on its back to kind of give us an identity or identification with certain things. And I know that some of this, fear, shame, anger, all of that, doubt, that may not even be something we realized that we had stored inside of our bodies, our cellular memory. So this is our memory, we are remembering, and it's stored inside of our cellular memory. More and more studies are showing that water holds memory. If you look at the snowflake, if you look at Dr. Masaru Emoto's studies of water, and cymatics, vibration, this is all a vibration. All of these thoughts hold a vibration. If you put these words into water, they make a shape. All of this is a sound. It's an energy. It's a frequency. And I encourage you to look up cymatics if you've never looked that up before. Sorry, this little marker. I think it's CYMATICS. So it's showing the stuff that basically what sound looks like in a substance, in matter. We are matter. We are a substance. We have water. We are made up of water. So we're carrying with us all of these thoughts, patterns, emotions, attachments. We've been resounding. We've been creating a frequency based on all of these things. So a lot of us are starting to lighten the load. And as we go through this journey, we start to remember who we really were, which is not all of these things, right? We start to come into a place potentially of coherence, which is a long wave of energy. We're all waves. That's another thing this is all about, is waves and frequency. And we come back into a place of heart-centered awareness. Know thyself. We start to remember this inner light, and we start to feel, or maybe we've always felt this way, the more we begin to feel gratitude and appreciation, the easier it is for us to lighten the load, clear and release the sludge or the distortions in the sound that is holding us down, right? So that's essentially a little bit of a description of what we're experiencing from my perspective in this lifetime on Earth. Also, some of that sludge and all of those heavier frequencies can be carryover from other lifetimes. They can be carryover from all kinds of things. So here we are, little humans, holding all of this stuff, and we think that our goal is to get from here potentially, and by the way, not everybody's goal is to get anywhere. Some people like being here. That's a whole other video. We could call that service to self, or we could call it addiction to being here. it feels safer for some people to stay in this place because that's all they remember. That's all they know, or better spoken, that's all they think they know based on the stories that they've been listening to, telling themselves. And when we tell ourselves something, we are listening to that. Our water in our body holds that memory, creates a shape and a sound, and that pulls into our very cells and essentially embeds in our architecture and becomes part of us, because words have energy. Everything's energy. So I'm trying to keep it simple. So many people want to get from here to here. This little stick figure with the big heart is pink. Love, gratitude, bliss, patience, compassion, appreciation, service to others. The irony in it is, in order to get there, we have to have service to self first, but not from the place of greed, power, and control, but it's actually knowing thyself. We have to go within to feel gratitude, to feel appreciation. And so that's kind of a difficult process for a lot of people to get from here to here. And we might say, from a very broad perspective, that's what some people are labeling ascension, right? We're going from a denser dimension, a heavier dimension, to a lighter, more buoyant, higher vibration, which is in a higher dimensional field of space. From my perspective, they're all intertwined. It's like nesting dolls. So from my perspective, our dimension that we exist within is based on our perception and what we're able to perceive and what we're creating in the now moment. Okay, so this parentheses I'm going to get to in another video because I think it's kind of an important topic. But and how do we get from here to here is also going to be in another video, although I'll sprinkle some of that in here. But the biggest message I want to share in that line is that we're not going really anywhere. We're not going from here to here. From my perspective, that is we're bridging that. And as we feel these emotions of, let's say, anger, and we recognize that's what we're experiencing, we allow ourselves to feel that, we then are able to reorganize the cellular memory within our bodies to dissolve that, or to transmute it, or to alchemize it into the feelings or remembrance of the original blueprint, which is love, bliss, joy, compassion. So by us recognizing I'm feeling this way, in some regards, right, we're then able to utilize that emotion sometimes as a catalyst to be able to disengage from it, or dissolve it, or to transmute it, and bring ourselves into a higher state, ascension, or awareness that we are more than this, that we are really not any of these things that we have told ourselves or believed that we were. They're just part of this human template and architecture that we've chosen to come here and experience. And that's just one perspective out of many. So what happens is, as we kind of oscillate back and forth, and that's kind of this bridge is what we're creating. And I could draw kind of a schematic of what that looks like energetically, but we'll just say it's a bridge. Many of us are going back and forth between the two. Some of us are here, and then we're here, and then we're here. And then we may find ourselves at one point in time coming into a little bit more balance, where maybe we're half. We still feel a little bit of shame, but we're forgiving ourselves for feeling that way. We're being patient with ourselves, and we're working through that. And then at another point in time or in space, we are recognizing that we've dissolved that, and that no longer fits within our space of expansion. We no longer have room for that. And now that is replaced, and I drew, oh, I think I deleted it, Stargate earlier of what we're dissolving now is being filled with that light. So that sludge that was there, it kind of looks like a dark cloud. It looks like I think I did a video, you know, the Peanuts character in Charlie Brown where he's got like the dirt all around him and the flies. Oh, my internet's a little wonky. Hopefully it doesn't go out. Either way, that becomes, it gets dissolved and we merge and we expand out and fill that with, I don't want to say something else, it just morphs into not that. It becomes, we become more complete. We start to fill these holes in of distortion with more knowingness of filling up maybe with compassion, appreciation, gratitude, all of that. So what happens is, and I'm going to come back to this in a minute, I'm leaving this open for a reason, I'm reminding myself. So the more consistently we can come into that space of coherence, the more we are able to recognize these feelings and not bypass them, not pretend that they're not there, not jump from here to here and just pretend like this is what we're feeling, when in actuality, this anger is deeply rooted, you know, and we have these things we're holding on to, but we're pretending that we're not. No, we're addressing them and we're giving them a new address. We're cleaning house, right? Our address is our home. It's our numbers. It's a vibration. All numbers hold a frequency of where we are located in time and space, or what dimension we are existing within because of the address or the numbers or the geometry or the frequency or the patterns, follow what I'm saying, that we're holding in our field that create our reality. So we dissolve that, we come back into that state of awareness, and it becomes smoother. So this is what essentially we're doing from a very basic perspective. And as we are able to recognize these feelings and emotions more regularly, we're able to disentangle from them. Whew. Heart palpitations, that's a whole other, the symptoms, upgrade symptoms, right? I'm hearing upgrade senses. We're sensing things that are shifting in our body. Now, I'm not going into all of the symptoms that we might experience while we're going through this, but it can be all kinds of things. Another way of looking at this is as the Kundalini, okay, we'll talk about that in just a moment. I drew that in green, you can't really see it. So let's just see the caduceus, right? The medical symbol, the snake that goes up the pole, the cross, the snake. We have energy that is stored in our body. Okay, do I want to jump into this? Let's just say that, okay, before I go into that. So that was a simpler way. We begin to know thyself rather than this separate self that holds all of this baggage. We begin to loosen up, open up, expand out, and we begin to radiate that energy rather than being compressed all the time. We begin to expand and grow, and that is where we are right now for most of us. Well, we're always growing, but rather than going in this direction, we're growing in this direction. So I wrote ego here because a lot of people are and this is one way of looking at it. I feel that it is very much like the death of the ego is what, but I wanted to kind of make it sound a little nicer, because our ego isn't something that should be hated or judged, because when we come back to judgment of, ooh, that's ego, oh, that's this, well, we're bringing, and this is another conversation topic I want to talk about, is judgment. Judgment's really a really big sludgy energy. Thou shalt not judge, know thyself. there's certain staple, simple statements that were made in books, and then all these details were attached to them. But let's just keep it simple. So when we begin to know thyself, we are holding a different space, a different pattern, because we're in a place of openness, we're in a place of lightness, we're in our hearts. And this heart frequency, which is referred to as heart coherence, allows us to remap our bodies. It allows us to remap our senses, our system. We begin to sense things differently. We begin to see things differently. So then we hold a different perspective. We hold a different frequency, right? They're all frequencies. It's a different wavelength. One looks like this, short, bouncy, and one is long and smooth. So as we hold this frequency or this different perspective, we can see fear, we can see anger, we might feel it at times, but it doesn't hold power over us, because we are then in our own power, our centripetal, I always say that wrong, centripetal. We're in our own spin. Our toroidal field is then created around us that has unification with what we really are, not the attachments we have assigned to ourselves. And that comes back to assignments, school, upgrade, we're higher grade, higher frequency, so on and so forth. So that ego it naturally morphs into, and I'm hearing, we joked in a video that Candace and I did, Lego my ego. We're letting go of ego. We're letting it go. And we're not controlled or in the need to constantly control who we think we need to be, what we are, why this is happening. It becomes more of a fluid exchange with the fluidity of our reality, and it becomes less rigid. This is rigid, this is fluid. Hard lines soften, we have that long cosine, synchronistic, energistic, synchronization and harmonization with our bodies, with our thoughts, because that heart coherence, when you map that into the brain, and they're using map as an example of where we are located in space and time, what dimension we are holding, right? A map is our habit patterns, the words that we use. So we then are able to feel above and beyond that egoic layer, and that layer just becomes absorbed. And what I'm hearing is we have a higher absorption rate, and we begin to dissolve these lower ideologies, ideas, and concepts, and things become more transparent. They become translucent. We become lucid in our reality, and we're not locked into a density or pattern of frequency that keeps us locked into the egoic only. So that's a rough outline. So we begin to know that these things such as fear, anger are distortions, and they are no longer necessary for our survival. Maybe at one time they were, but we're in a different field now. So we are being invited, called, asking for a different set of rules, so to speak. And then I'll come into that with the parentheses in another video. I could do this, I could keep going on and on and on about different versions of reality and how this looks, but to keep it simple, let's talk about the fact that now when we dissolve these, we're seeing a lot of, so obviously we're not always going to be here, and it's not even that this is our goal. From my perspective, we came here to have I'm hearing fortified, as well as broad and flavorful experience, which means we wanted to taste all the flavors of the rainbow. So now we've done that. And now there's new colors, there's new flavors to be experienced that are not necessarily accessible here. When we're in a sludgy environment, we can't see as well, we can't think as well, we feel detached, we feel separate, right? We feel as if we are locked into something that we can't quite understand. And in some cases, we don't even know that anything else outside of this exists. And this leads me into kind of what I'm seeing with chaos versus coherence. When you're here, when we're here, which many of us have been there, we have loved ones maybe that are stuck there. We don't know thyself because we have too many attachments and thoughts and that are telling a story, that are keeping us in a looping pattern and a cycle that is very difficult at times to move out of, because it's a pattern that has kept us within a certain, I'm hearing again, address on a block. So we've been blocked, we've been living at that same address for so long, we really don't know. It's a little bit like the Truman story I'm hearing, like the Truman Show, where he doesn't know there's anything beyond that. Although in the Truman Show, his life was pretty good, but we get what we're here. So what happens is, as we start to come into this energy and we start to dissolve some of this baggage or sludge, that energy of gratitude can come in and fill those spots, and we begin to feel lighter and more fulfilled. And what I'm being shown is this is happening very much in a very natural way. Some people are doing this with intention, and because of where we're at in alignment with the solar system, because of what's happening in the earth, because of what's happening with the sun, a lot of this is naturally dissipating. For some people, this can happen in overnight. They might wake up one day and feel like they're a different person, renewed, refreshed, and all of this is gone. And they're ready. So here they are. And that's really happening to a lot of people. And it's very exciting. There's a lot of people, though, that are unable to see past that. And what happens is sometimes when this opens up, that hole, which was like this, dark sludge that represented, I can't remember, was shame. This is what it looks like, right? So this is shame. It's like a tornado. And so once that's dissolved, it can feel scary because we're used to having that attachment entity. If we're giving something energy, it becomes this idea, story, that becomes almost like a living, breathing thing, because that's what a story is. You read a story and you imagine the characters and you feel this resonance with what you're reading about. So if you're constantly telling yourself something, I'm not worthy, I'm ugly, I'm this, I'm that, your body receives the message and builds accordingly, energetically, through the water, through the electricity, as the conduit that we are. And this becomes a living entity or attachment and magnetizes, from one perspective, more of that. So without going into too much detail about some of the things that we're witnessing, or maybe we've experienced ourselves, these attachments can pull in more of that energy and frequency. I'm going to get to that in just a moment. So the one thing they're wanting to share is, when we release that, if we're not able to just let it go and just appreciate where we are now, and it becomes, it can almost feel like we're missing something. And so sometimes we recreate that pattern because that's what we're used to coming home to, right? I remember listening to Tony Robbins years ago. By the way, that was a really fun event, like 20 years ago that I went to. And one of the things that Tony Robbins had said, if I remember correctly, was, it was conditioning, basically. We condition ourselves. So we have an argument with our partner. I've used this story before. And we come home, we have a great day at work. We come home, our partner's grumpy. We get into a fight, not good. The next day, we're having an okay day. We come home, we get into another fight, and we go to bed angry. Third day, we're having a great day. We come home and we feel angry. We're grumpy and we don't know why, and we're still like, because it's the residual, it's the residue, it's a conditioning, it's a pattern that has now been activated. And because we somehow fell into a habit of expecting, even subconsciously, we don't even realize why we feel that way, that can show up for us again and again. So we could say that that's part of what our 3D, 4D reality kind of had floating around in it, because that was part of what we co-created together as a way of interacting with these energies and learning from one perspective. So what the guides are showing me also, so people might be recreating that, and then they're in that bubble, and it's hard to get from here to here, when all we really need to do is come into space coherence, dissolve those or integrate those feelings, allow ourselves to purge them through the physical, through our conversation, work, body work, and I could go into all of that, meditation, yoga, whatever it might be. And all of a sudden, one day we feel a little bit lighter. And all of a sudden we feel better about ourselves. And we're not hanging on to that pattern of shame. And maybe we come to a space instead where now we realize we're angry at the person that made us feel shameful. Then that's the next thing that maybe we're working through, integrating, processing. And we might all of a sudden come across all kinds of angry people because it's a reflection of what we're feeling inside or what we haven't processed. And that's, again, another video, but kind of give us a little flavor on that, why we're seeing all of this unfolding. So what else is happening, and I'm going to come back to that, why are we seeing that? As we have, so what's going on within our bodies, all of these energies, patterns, frequencies have also been acted out on the earth. So think about how many wars and battles we've had. What does that energy represent? Greed, control, rage, power, fear. So that energetically on a quantum level also gets stored, and this is a little esoteric, but bear with me, stored inside the cellular memory of the earth. So while we're healing, right, so too is earth a living being, right? She grows. Anything that grows is alive. We get food from the earth. She's alive. So it's a life. She's a sentient being. And maybe while she doesn't process things the way we do, those energies still hold this, a frequency. And some of that has been stored inside, we'll say, the earth. And she's in the process of belching all of that out. The sun is coming in. What does the sun do? Well, it heats things up. It's radiation, plasma energy, alchemy. We could also look at this as alchemization, right? We're shifting from one place, space, point in time, dimension, frequency to a different octave, sound, frequency, vibration. So our body is a template. It's a temple, it's a template, it's a structure. So we have glandular activation and chemicals inside of our body, hormones in our body that respond to alchemy. They respond to the moon cycles. They respond to what's happening in the sun, right? And for those of you who don't know, more babies are born on the full moon. There's more fights on the full moon, more arrests, more heart attacks. We're having a lot of changes with the sun, etc., etc. So we are connected to the earth, and her shifts are affecting our shifts, but our shifts are affecting her shifts because it's a unified field from one perspective. So what happens is, as the sun comes in, which we've all noticed, many of us have begun to notice what's happening with the sun, the Schumann resonance, which is directly connected to us, by the way, this increases the purge. She's purging, we're purging. Floods, emotions, right? Shakes, earthquaking, right? The sun can increase the earthquakes. I think that has to do with the magnetic field, right? That's being affected by the radiation. So on and so forth. So we are, as we're going through all of this, it can also be enhanced by what's going on in the earth. Because when, again, I keep hearing this song over and over again. I feel the earth move under my feet, right? So we're feeling this, and that creates our own stuff. Our heart responds to solar activity, right? Especially in women, from what I'm reading about. Sometimes we get dizzy when the earth is going through these changes. Sometimes we can get headaches when their barometric pressure changes, so on and so forth. So if we are becoming and releasing this, we also are heightening our sensitivity, right? We're becoming more aware, and our senses are activating. This also has to do with the cerebral spinal fluid, the CSF in the body, and Kundalini awakening, and so on and so forth, which means, from another perspective, we may be more sensitive to these changes, right? Our bodies are changing, and we're in attunement, because we're made up of the same elements on a quantum scale that the earth is made up from. So whatever, as within, so without. So this starts to impact us at a grander scale in some cases. In some cases, nobody's going to feel it. In other cases, we're going to feel everything. And so as this stuff comes up, let's say, what I was being shown, and I've, again, done a video on this before, and it's been synchronistic this week, is sludge, Slimer. Candace and Jess and I were talking about this. Ghostbusters. So what is a ghost? And I'm not talking about loved ones that have passed on, that are trapped. Let's take that into another category. I'm just talking about plasma, energy, frequency, patterns, right? So one of the really, really useful things that we can do for our bodies right now is cranial sacral therapy. So the cerebral spinal fluid that goes up and down the spine, that bathes our body, is important. It's life, essentially. We need it for our brain, for our health and well-being. When we have blockages, emotional or physical trauma, it can hold a pattern that the body adapts, and some of that juice, the cranial sacral fluid, cerebral CSF, can't get where it needs to go. And that's just a simplified version. So now we're starting to get into a rhythm where the earth is pumping and opening. And so we're starting to feel these shifts, and our body is responding and opening, and vice versa, because we are a collective of energy, so the earth can feel us too. And this can activate dormant energy centers, because that's also happening inside the earth. And that might be a whole other video. So just to talk about Kundalini and CSF, as this cerebral spinal fluid moves up the body, it bathes our body. And while that sounds magical and amazing, just like becoming more buoyant and becoming lighter, it brings up, from my perspective, all the stuff, all the particles accelerate, alchemy. They shift and they move, and things are activated. And anything that was held as residue, stuck plasma, residual energy, that is a shape, a sound, a frequency, becomes really, it releases like a gas. And we all know that sometimes that can be toxic, poisons. So we're essentially detoxing, and this is all happening simultaneously. Sometimes I'm hearing, all I need is the air that I breathe and to love you. Candace, I think you're gonna love that one. So we're detoxing, we're pulling all this stuff up, and it can be scary. It can be exciting. It can feel weird. And just like an earthquake feels weird and can have some things happen that are a result of shifts, movements in the tectonic plates, when we have our pineal gland crack open or detoxify or decalcify, that pine cone in the head that's written throughout all ancient writings, or the brain stem activates and turns on, and we feel this fluid moving up into our ventricles or horns, right? We begin to become sensitive to sound, and there's all this chaos around us. Our heart opens and we feel compassion and love and emotions that we've never felt before. All kinds of things can happen. And this will be different for everyone because everyone has a different pattern in their own snowflake, in their own water set. We're all individual snowflakes. Each snowflake is different in their own fingerprint, in their own DNA, in their own memory. Whatever their attachments, all of that becomes available, accessible, and reorganizes in such an alchemical way, yet there is it takes some adjustments for all of that to line up and click into place. And so when we do that, the key is to breathe, go into the heart, and maintain as often as we can, consistently as we can, coherently as we can, sustain that so we can become sustainable and stay out and receptive to the receptors that are opening inside of our body and that are turning us on. And that requires us to go within and know thyself. So if this is happening for someone who's here, and it can happen, that all of this is still there in the field, or it's in the earth, and some of that is being felt by us. I was shown from a very esoteric perspective, these ghosts or plasmatic energies that have been held in the earth are being released. Burps, belches, and other things. And some of us are feeling that. Some of us are able to witness it with compassion and love. Some of us are feeling that stir things up, and we process it, integrate it, digest it. And there are others that attach to it, and that's another perspective. So I wanted to say that when some of these things come up, this person may be more triggered because they're attached to that story or that energy or let's say what's being released in the earth is, let's say it's an entity, and we'll call that entity shame. You've seen Game of Thrones. Shame. And all of a sudden, this person who hasn't healed this, or should I say integrated it, allowed themselves to feel it, or only feels this, right? Maybe this person jumped over here, but they really still have a lot of this here. When that burp comes up, it might look like an energy, and it, from one perspective, and this is a lower dimensional perspective, because from another perspective, a higher dimensional perspective, all is love, all is light, everything is in unity and oneness, and we are being called to stay out of judgment or labeling of these energies. But just to show what it looks like from another perspective, that energy can then sometimes attach itself to this energy. They like buddy up, like, hey pal, you're shame, I'm shame. Let's play. And then when that energy or frequency meets, it can be from two people coming together who both hold pockets of shame, and they reflect that off of each other. And all of a sudden, there's this reason to be shamed, or we could say anger. Anger is a really good one right now. There's a lot of anger coming up, distortions around judgment. Thou shalt not this, thou shalt not that. However, I also believe at some point the statement was, thou shalt not judge. Yet there's people that are throwing and slinging poo at each other, and it's their own stuff that they haven't addressed in their own home, because they're not in a place where they know thyself. They're instead reflecting out and seeing it reflected back, judgment, shame, anger, whatever it might be. So this is where entity attachments, from my perspective and a very neutral perspective, come from. And this is, again, keep it simple. So if we start to look at this as an energetic expression of a human emotion and thought pattern that is held together by a cohesive consistency that then creates this bubble of distortion that becomes this living entity from one perspective, it is something that a lot of people are picking up. It's like magnetized to them, because we are all, it's like it's looking for a host. And the other way of looking at this is parasites. And I'm playing with this also because what many people, myself included, have noticed, we're having skin rashes, flare-ups, parasites, a lot of heavy metals are wreaking havoc in our body. And that's, again, we should probably go into a separate video on that. But when we detox the body, so just like the earth is purging and detoxing, so all this stuff is coming out, parasites can come up. All of a sudden, we realize, oh, I've got some gut issues, or I've got some liver issues. We all have parasites. They're part, bacteria. There's good bacteria, there's bad bacteria. Without labeling it, does it look like this, right? Or is it more like this? Or is it kind of in the middle where we're a little bit more balanced? If it looks like this, it's going to pull up, what do parasites do? And I am really passionate about talking about parasites because I've had my own experiences. I ate sushi for years and I loved it. And then I went vegetarian, and then it's a long story. Some of you have heard it. But from my experience, as these parasites come up, if there's a lot of heavy metals in our system, they enhance each other. And it can cause the body to feel things like fear and anxiety, or it can cause the heart to speed up, heart palpitations, the gut brain, right? And all of a sudden we're in constant, that creates cortisol in the body. This is a lot of cortisol, person. So that stimulates and overstimulates the system, shuts down some things, and our neurotransmitters are not able to receive the signals, and it fries our system. And it can cause a sense of complete chaos, and we're unable to ground into our bodies. We're unable to feel stable. Our thoughts are all over the place because those parasites are then controlling, from one perspective, our thoughts even. Because if our cortisol is up and our hormones are off, we feel angry, irritable, we don't sleep. By the way, that might not be why we're not sleeping. We got a lot of stuff going on here as to why we might not be sleeping. Our patterns are a little bit off. But if you combine all of that and parasites, you want to eat certain things that feed the parasites, etc., we end up stuck here and drawing more of that to us, and it becomes a pattern. So we can think of the parasites as entities as well. So there's all kinds of ways of looking at it. And if we are parasite ridden, we end up with these holes that all of this comes up and comes in, and we start to pull that in, right, from one perspective, and it becomes this sludgy environment, and it's literal in our bodies. So we're really being called to cleanse, detoxify, purify, alchemize, so that we can start to lighten this load. So that's the simple version. Now, I really am being called also to talk about judgment, greed. The emotions and energetic equivalent to a lower frequency are basically anything associated with fear, anger. And I feel called to play with that briefly, so I will. So I'm being called to look at the etymology here. And so we have judge, examine, appraise, make a diagnosis, use discernment, decide, think, suppose. It has to do with law. There's more to this though. So I'm not talking about using discernment, and actually I am. My guides were like, actually kind of is. All right, so I'm gonna see if I can explain. When we are passing, giving energy to, sharing a judgment, and let's say it's in the form of an opinion, right? We've heard over and over again, use our discernment, but we're being called to do that from a sovereign place of know thyself. So if we have attachments to fear, anger, and shame, greed, power, or we need to control, we feel victimized or victimizers, and that's another topic. The discernment, or the place in which we are making a decision, is also shadowed by this. So we have a lot of affliction, is what I'm being called to say. And there's a lot of that happening where I'm hearing passing the energy, passing the ball, passing the buck. There is this energetic need, because when we have this going on in our field, we are not able to know thyself, because we are being pulled out and pulling in energies that are in chaos and distortion versus clarity, coherence, and unity. So if we have a lot of people that are judges that are here, that means they are passing a verdict, a decision, an opinion, and those are not all the same things, but they are making a verdict with this in their field. So the clarity isn't coming from coherence. And so I'm being called from a quote from the Bible, but I can't remember it right now. But basically, they know not what they do. Because they know not what they do, because they are being moved or stuck by all of this. And even if that, and by the way, I'm really being called to say this does not make that person a bad person. They might still have compassion. They might still love their children or feel, this isn't to say this is a total service to self, greedy, hateful, divisive person. That's a whole other, they don't even care about any of this other stuff. This is just someone who's had a rough go of it. They've been abused, or they've been mistreated, or they've listened to someone tell them something for so long that they believe it to be true, etc., etc., etc. So this person can be a very giving person. A martyr, someone who gives and gives and gives and then doesn't feed themselves, is a good person to some extent, right? They help other people. But because they haven't healed or come into the realization that they need love too, or that they're not necessarily in the right frame of mind, and that's a play on words, heart coherence, heart-brain coherence. Instead, they might be in a place of survival brain, or if that makes sense. So we're really being called to not judge them. And that's huge right now. People are making choices and decisions because of all the stuff that's coming up, that's being released and realized, and in some cases ignored because they can't see it, or they choose not to because it's scarier sometimes to deal with this and to pretend that they're here, than it is to actually do the work. And some people don't know how to do the work, or don't know what to do, which is a completely different video. So if we think we're here, but we're judging all of them and essentially saying that what they should be doing and looking down on them, then we are still holding that distortion in our field. And then the question becomes, what is that attached to? Well, that's fear. And where did that come from? Maybe we feel abandoned, or we feel as if we should be taking back what's ours because we have a sense of we need to have control, power. Now, by the way, control and power are not necessarily bad things. Power, our will, our divine will, power from that heart-centered coherence is innate. It's part of what we came here to be and remember, and we can use our power of love, of compassion. Those are all powers, our superpowers, our, I'm hearing covalent bonds. Oh, I'm going into another flow. That's another video. Okay, time to kind of close everything out. So that can come from feeling out of control, feeling like we were controlled our whole lives. We don't want to be told what to do anymore. So we're taking back that power and we're going to tell them. That is a lower frequency. It's a lower energy. So it's a fine line. And it is something that we're being called to recognize, to feel, to reorganize it and go, whoa, I just passed judgment on that person. And that is matching their frequency. That's matching that frequency. May not drop us down into all of this, but that little bubble then matches up with this little bubble, and we get drawn into that tornado from one perspective rather than creating our own beautiful toroidal spin of smooth coherence. And what I'm being called to share is we then read the signs, it's a sine wave, accordingly. So there are people who are saying, well, I see this and I am that, and they're seeing it from this bubble of perception. That's the perspective that they're holding. So from that space of not fully being detoxified and reunified, reorganized, realized, decisions are made, actions are taken, and then we are going into more of a reaction, reenacting the old stuff that's bubbling up, coming out, being stirred up, that we're attaching to because we recognize it or we aren't recognizing it. Sometimes we're like, ooh, I want more of that. It feels good because I'm used to feeling that way. Because we don't necessarily know what really feels good from a different vibration. I will share at one point, I didn't realize I was holding on to all this anxiety until one day I didn't have it anymore. And I went, and it was cranial sacral that changed my life. Well, one of the things, I've done a lot of things. This has been an ongoing journey in my reality. When I had this cranial sacral experience, all of a sudden this tension released in my body, and I didn't even realize it was there. And I was a new person, because when we're in constant pain, when we're in suffering, when we're in this sense of all that stuff we are holding in our bodies and it gets released, it's like a whole new world, right? A whole new world. And we don't know what we don't know, because we can't know if we're blocked by all of that stuck energy. And that's really all this is. And I want to end on that. All of this stuff, we can label it, we can dissect it, we can analyze it, and some people are really good at that. We can also get lost in that. So without getting lost in translation, which has been a theme ongoing, we're really being called just to lighten up, whatever that looks like. And we may be here sometimes. The beauty of that is when we are able to dissolve some of this, maybe all of it, we can see when someone else is in it. And we are able to hold resonance, coherence, compassion. Right? And I invite you to look up those words. Look up what those means. Okay, golden means. Heartmath.com or heartmath.org. Dan Winter talks about it. Fractal Field. Also, I think it's 7arrows.net was one other website that I found that was really kind of cool. He has a lot of diagrams. He has tons of videos on YouTube. So should I end with some quick, okay. Having said all of that, that's what's going on from my perspective. So quick list. I'm going to do some little updates. Breathe. As I breathe in, I calm my body. As I breathe in, I calm my mind. Whatever affirmation you want to use. As I breathe out, I release and let go. What am I letting go of? Sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes as I release and let go, I'm letting go of doubt. Wow. Ask, what am I letting go of? Because sometimes you'll get the answer. And if you don't get the answer, don't get stuck and get pulled back into that left brain analytical thinking, because part of this is about coherence, which is also brain synchronization, which synchronizes the left and right hemispheres, so we're not always thinking logically. We then access a creative abundance versus fear of and being in lack, which is a whole other topic. So that's coming up, right? In the field right now, all the fear around money. Breathing in for 5 counts, breathing out for 5 counts for 2 minutes. If you can do 5 minutes, if you can do 10 minutes. If you can drop in throughout the day and ask yourself, am I breathing? How am I breathing? These are all simple tricks to get us back into our bodies, to recognize our rhythm, recognize if we're breathing fast. Are we slowing? Can we slow it down? What am I feeling right now? What am I tuning into and paying my attention to? Is it creating any of this, especially judgment? When I watch that, am I triggered to judge someone else and to put them down? I gotta tell you guys, I'm human. I oscillate. I have moments where I watch something and I become sad because of the way another human is treating another human. That's not wrong to feel that way. It's then up to me to make the choice to respond in the best way that I can respond, which starts here so that I don't pull my own field down, and then I respond from here. And that leads me to the end, which is choice point and still point. So in cranial, and I'll get into parentheses in another video. When we bring us up into still point, we are bringing ourselves into stillness. It allows our nervous system to reset. You can look it up with craniosacral therapy. I highly recommend. That's another tool for everybody to use. And it gives us the opportunity to be still and know thyself. We know, we can feel, okay, this is what I'm feeling right now. It allows us to take that release, that exhale, so we can reset the thinking, reset the body, reset the craniosacral pump and fluid, so we can get back into a rhythm and a state of coherence easier. So the more we can find that center, that stillness, that space, rather than compression. It's another good clue if you're feeling pressure in the chest, go outside and breathe. Obviously, if there's a lot of fires going on, it may not be a good idea, but breath work, yoga, body work, massage. Try it all. If one thing doesn't work, try something else. These patterns can sometimes lock us into, I'm hearing self-inquiry. Be curious. How would that look if I felt this way? Be curious about what options are out there. Verify. I just had an incredible healing experience at R3 Miracles in Clearwater, Florida. Clearwater? No. Tampa, Florida, with Alasa and Candace. And it feels amazing when you're able to utilize these pieces of technology. Sound healing, sound bowls. I have a whole set of crystal bowls. Be playing those more often. Cymatics, frequency, binaural beats, all of these things. And I'll do a video just on that, but hopefully, get curious, start doing some research. Ask. So, I said that was the last thing, but I also want to say coherence and unity versus chaos, us versus them. So if we are not in that still point, to be still and know, and we're not holding that ability to make a choice, and we're making a choice from here, that is, I have to do this because they're going to do that. I believe this and they believe that, therefore I am right and they are wrong. Well, that might be true from one perspective. From another perspective, they're making a choice from here. They know not what they do. So rather than me going into a place of judgment and casting judgment on them, blame, trying to control what they decide, if we all took a moment and went back within and were making decisions from here, this wouldn't happen anymore. And that's what we're working towards from one perspective. So in love and light, I hope this was helpful to someone watching this. If you feel like it was helpful, please share it with others. And I appreciate everyone who is sharing in this energy, working together going through what we're going through, it is a journey. It is an ongoing, working, magical, emotional, expressive, feeling experience. So here we are. I'm hearing, let the good times roll, let them knock you down. Or is it around? Make up my own words. Utilize our own vehicle, the cars, and utilize sound and song. Dance through this as best we can. Utilize movement to move out these stuck energies, right? So we can use ourselves, our vehicles, as a resource rather than an energy distribution system giving to someone else's resource. That's a whole other video. In love and light, thank you so much, guys. Namaste.